More than 10,000 flowers and 6 million seeds in each plant. I need to see it in bloom, and I want seeds. What for? To grow 40-foot-high Puya Rayamunde at Westwood Lake. You think you'll be that lucky, I asked. It's my middle name, he said. Your middle name is Beware, I said. Where else should we go? From the Altiplano to the Amazon to the Andes, he said. I'll take you around Cusco and the Sacred Valley, but we'll need guides to go down the Amazon and for the Santa Cruz trek over the Cordillera Blanca. You know anyone, I asked? The Andes trek should be no big deal. We can find one in Juarez, he said. The Amazon may be trickier. He rolled trickier around his tongue. You have someone in mind, I said, knowing that he had someone in mind. Papa handed me a book. Read this, he said, and then call me. It was a paperback by someone called Tahir Shah with a cover that showed an ancient llama wool textile from coastal Peru in the form of a winged figure adorned with human trophy heads. I read it that night, all night, even though I was working the next day. Papa had apparently selected our guide. Although neither the guide nor I knew it yet, it was all a bit melodramatic. I called Papa Smirk. You're not serious. It wasn't so much of a question as an order, but it was all far too late for that. The rest, as they say, was profoundly consequential. So I'll give you a spoiler, because you've sat so long. That's the Puya Rayamunde, and that's the Jagus hummingbird. And that's November, and they only bloom in May. So we did very well, or they did very well. All right, last one of this Amazonian thing. We were down the Amazon. We were 5 rivers down the Amazon. And it got dark. I retreated into a field test of the head-to-toe bug suit armor that I had modeled at Papa's 50th birthday party. They bit clean through it. I saturated it and myself in so much pure DEET, my skin burned. They bit through that as well. Only the bottle of rum that Papa was slowly strangling under the caiman skulls would provide any relief. Internal medicine, he asked. In the sudden fall of night, small openings in the jungle canopy mixed the stars with the moving fireflies in a fantastic, phantasmagorical cosmic dance of light, like before the skies became ruled by the mathematics that had kicked the gods out of the velvet void of space. Gee, that's pretty good. I thought that our dinner of catfish and rice would end that day, but Richard, after a few beers and a couple of fatties, was determined to give us our money's worth. Night cruise, he shouted. We don't do tourismo, we do terrorismo. No sooner had he pointed to a pecky dugout long-tail motor launch on the mud bank than he was in it and had the outboard started even before Papa and I had jumped in. I counted my fingers and toes. Let me see. Not only were we heading out on a remote jungle river in pitch-black darkness among the treachery of snakes and caimans and the river itself, our guide's sailing stability was 3 sheets to the wind. Once again, however, Richard was in his element. He handed over 2 flashlights to strafe the shoreline and the steep black walls of the jungle and told us to tell him when we saw any pairs of glowing, golden eyes. Papa quickly flushed a 3-foot baby spectacled caiman, and Richard dove out of the front of the boat to catch it. He showed us how to bite down ever so gently on its muzzle to make its tail swing. After we released him, Papa spotted a bigger one, but Richard missed him in the leap. After that, Papa and I quietly stopped detecting caiman eyes because Richard would try and tackle all of them, regardless of size, and the damage an angry 6-foot crocodilian could inflict inside our flimsy, narrow dugout would be the end of us all. Fortunately, every 2.5 square kilometers of Amazonian forest is home to 23,000 distinct life forms, and we slowly worked our way through all the others without him detecting our newly found selectivity. But our secret decision to concentrate on birds didn't quite bring the more pacific results we were seeking. Jumping towards a pee, pee, pee. In the shadows, Richard grabbed a rare 2-foot-long boat-billed heron, transfixed in our lights. The heron grabbed him back, firmly on his own beak. Blood gushed forth. Neither flinched. When Richard finally loosened the grip, he handed me the boat bill, still loudly clacking his cartilage. "Here, Tic-Tac," he said. "Let him go." "You let him go," I said. Richard shut off the engine and lights, allowing us to drift back into the mainstream belly of the Amazon tributary. We floated into a vibrant throbbing of tiered, harmonious life, surging surreal in surround sound. "What's next?" I asked, unable to contain myself. Avicularia, Richard said. "Giant pink-toed tarantulas." Papa, a devout arachnophobe, pretended he hadn't just heard that. "Arboreal, communal, cannibalistic, 6 inches long, and everywhere," Richard added. "Stationized in a mobile trance, sitting and waiting until the moment of attack." "Excellent," Papa said. "Hordes of 1/2-foot-long tarantulas waiting to ambush dinner." "With pink toenails," Richard said. "Fuck the pink toenails," Papa said. But that only made Richard more determined to find them. He turned the throttle, and accelerating us into a stand of overhanging banyan trees which soared spookier in the cross-beamed efforts of our weak illumination. The first tarantula caught scurried over his face and back. True to their title, the tips of his legs looked as if they had been neatly coated with pretty pink nail polish. Richard left the dugout to go further into the grove, and I suddenly realized we were alone, didn't know the way back, and wouldn't have been able to get there if we did. "I'm praying the son of a bitch is still alive in there," Papa said, "so that once he gets us back, I can kill him." Richard called that he was having trouble locating good specimens and was going in deeper. Papa reassured him it would be quite all right if he didn't. When I finally joined the call to retrieve him, the look of relief on Papa's face when he reappeared was worth the cost of admission. But now it was getting late, whatever that meant in this darkness. We thought we were heading back to Jaldar, but Richard had caught a second wind. He launched our pecky-pecky into the riverbank and led us into the undergrowth and twilight. We sat down on the ground and switched off our lanterns. "What are we doing here?" I asked, and meant it both ways. "Calling jaguars," said Richard, like he did it all the time. "I do it all the time," he said. Whistling the screams of a small animal being attacked and killed by a predator, it sent ripples and chills. It's the little touches that make a future solid enough to destroy. "One dead baby," he whispered. And then, after a minute of silence for the dearly departed, he did it again. The squeals and screams were blood-curdling. The rustling brush slowed into silence. "One more dead baby," he whispered again. For a few minutes between Richard's cyclical dispatch of the entire litter, we waited for some large predator to claim the corpses, springing from the darkness into our laps. Unfortunately, there was no jaguar. Fortunately, there was no jaguar. After motoring back, we left him still quietly talking to himself and slid into our jungle hammocks. Papa and I were especially proud of ours 2 Hennessy Ultralight ASIM Classic Beauties, made on an island off Vancouver Island, with bottom entry, a rainfly, a zipper on top, the epitome of total comfort in the wilderness. We had already uncovered a design problem. The bugs were not from an island off Vancouver Island, but easily and voraciously right through the nylon and insecticide. All of our clothes ended up under us. That night, Papa discovered another more specific design problem, unique to Richard's little paradise. It turns out that, in the stiff competition for resources in the Amazon rainforest, mustached tamarin mothers kill offspring infants that have poor prospects for survival and consume their brains. Whoever the gremlin's mother was must have consumed his without killing him, because halfway through the night, he came back down out of the canopy, unzipped Papa's Hennessy Ultralight ASIM Classic Jungle Beauty, and defecated on his chest. And then it rained. How are we doing? We're over. No, we're not. Yeah, we're good. You up for one more? That's the thing that did it. That thing. That thing. All right, that's the last chapter. So this is the next one. which is done and out. It's on Amazon, but I don't have it here. But I do have an excerpt. You good for one more? Okay. I'm going to read it anyway. Okay, so this is Bwindi Impenetrable Forest in Uganda. And I chose this forest for two reasons. It was the cheapest way to get to the sea Mount Gorillas because it was impenetrable. I forget what the other reason was. And this is Lemwich. Lemwich is 19 years old. He is a ranger in Bwindi Impenetrable Forest. And Lemwich has a biblical name. And he was a monster, man. He drove us for 4.5 hours until we finally got to where we were going. So this is the last part of the saga to track the mountain gorillas. Lemwich marched us up and down the steepness of Bwindi, down new elephant-trampled bush paths, through moss and mud and thorns and fire-nettled needles, across thick lianas and lines of ants, around strangler figs and fractals, under light shafts and bromeliads and over ferns and fungi. All the while, Lemwich's walkie-talkie crackled with anticipation and changes in direction. A large, colorful patch of red lifted off another of black, contrasted on the orange muck of our path. They had been the red wings of the flies and a large smudge of gorilla spoor. "Look," Lemwich explained. "Gorilla." We looked. "Lemwich," I said, "we're looking for what made this." "I know," he said, "soon." And he began to move his gumboots as fast as he chattered into his walkie-talkie. We'd been into it 2 hours now, and it felt like more. Steve and I were soaked to the skin with sweat. Everything ached. Our water was half gone. Over the top of another rise and down to the bottom of the next ravine we slogged, waiting for the walkie-talkie to deliver us into the promised land. It broke into an excited, static squawking. Lemwich returned it pacing back and forth along the trail. He looked at us after it had gone silent.